Faran Fronczak is a comedian, but she's also my colleague on RT America, and I've had some wonderful discussions with her. She joins us now from across the pond to tell us how it's all looking from there. Faran, is the war fever reached the streets? Are people concerned, or is it still just within the bubble?
Well, first of all, I was thinking the same thing. How did that guy get a crossbow down the front of his pants? And you know what's funny is that's what happens in Florida a lot. So when it was said that it was in Florida, I was like, not surprised. But no, yeah. So the propaganda war machine, I will say, it's been, especially if you're on this side of the aisle with all of this, it's been tough here in the United States. There's a lot of people that are very pointing the fingers of, you're a Putin puppet, you're a Putin pusher, whether you work at RT or not. You know, you and I can say it. We've had a number of people that have resigned over the weekend, most likely out of fear. And it just goes to show as an American, at least myself watching this, is that this buildup of this Russian propaganda that you had so eloquently mentioned that you're seeing in the UK, it's worked. It's been building and building and building. And now we're here that now even my own family members have said, how can we believe you? You're Russian state media. And it's very sad because the American people now don't understand that when you have the left and the right media agreeing on something, that should be insanely scary, George, insanely scary.
But how did they manage to segue so quickly from China? Because you and I have had many conversations. When China was the ogre, it was China that the warships were steaming towards. It was China that looked likely to be an adversary, a military adversary. How do you build up anti-China hatred, and then suddenly you can switch it so quickly and so successfully?
The one thing I think that, you know, Americans right now, you turn on the television and in 60 seconds, they think that they figured out the entire Ukraine crisis. And what they get out of it is Putin bad, Trump bad, Biden good. And they don't know the history dating all the way back to the 1400s. If we want to go all the way back, but they don't understand, you know, the color revolutions that happened. They don't understand Maidan, the coup that was, you know, with the United States backing it. So the other thing they don't understand, besides the cultural, the boundaries, the language, they don't understand that this is an energy. This is an energy thing. We invaded Iraq over oil. This is the same thing, but over gas. You have the Nord Stream 2. You know, over the weekend, for those that are wanting to kind of get a really great deep dive, I recommend watching Oliver Stone's Ukraine on Fire. And then the sequel to that is Revealing Ukraine. And I had tweeted out a little clip of it where it talks about how Ukraine, many don't know, Ukraine used to be an amazing economy. You know, they were the #1 builders of locomotives and fighter jets and planes. They don't make any of that now. Do you know where they buy it from? The United States. That's who they get it from. You know, instead of going across the border to getting natural gas from Russia, they're importing it from the United States for double the money. And you start to see, it all starts to make sense when you look at the energy and why, again, going back to Iraq and Kuwait, you know, you're seeing a lot on the media here, George. And, you know, I don't want to downplay it or get conspiratorial and say that, you know, these people are paid actors or what have you. You know, I'll leave that for Alex Jones. But you see a lot of the tugging at the heartstrings. And it reminds me so much of that Nurse Nayara when, you know, before the United States went into Kuwait. And it was, for those that don't know the story, it was a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl that they had testify, not under oath, in front of Congress saying how the Iraqi soldiers were coming into a hospital where she was a volunteer and they were ripping babies out of incubators and killing them. And at that point, in the 90s, the United States was very 50-50, not wanting to go into the Iraq war. They saw this testimony and everyone said, we need to go in. We need to stop Saddam Hussein. This is awful. You're seeing history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme, as in the famous words of Mark Twain. And you're seeing a lot of these, women in bomb shelters in the metro holding their babies, saying this is horrible. And I'm not on the ground, so I don't know. But you're just seeing a lot of the same things being pushed. And as an American, we care. We want everybody to be happy and to be free. We're not all neocons like the Dick Cheneys and the Donald Rumsfelds of the world, but you see it and it tugs at American heartstrings, and we want to go in and help. And that's exactly what I'm seeing across the board on cable news here, George.
Now, here's a question that we've just posed in the poll, and overwhelmingly already people are answering in the affirmative. Would Trump have handled the Ukraine crisis better than Biden? I myself am absolutely persuaded of that. What's your view?
I absolutely have to agree with that as well. The one thing that's not being talked about here that when it comes to energy is Hunter Biden and John Kerry's stepson, who both of them were on the board at Burisma. Notice how John Kerry is pivoting and saying we need to talk about climate change. Maybe because his stepson might have a little bit to do with this, as well as Hunter Biden with Burisma. But again, I go back to, another one is the Putin interview with Oliver Stone, where he sits and talks. And the narrative so much that you hear is that Putin wants to bring the Soviet Union back together. That's his big thing. Little do you know, when you sit and Oliver Stone talks to him, you find out he grew up very poor. His mother worked in a factory. His father was injured in World War II. He saw how a lot of the economy was getting sucked dry because of the Soviet Union. And when, the Soviet Union broke apart, and then he reluctantly took the position and ran as president after Yeltsin, he went from the GDP where people were making $700 a year to $29,000 a year. If you want to talk about make America great again with Trump, that's what Putin did in the 2000s with Russia, where they were making their own energy. They were becoming more independent. And a lot of people, he had massive popularity because of that, very much in the same way as Trump. And I think Trump wanted, he sanctioned the Nord Stream 2, and then Putin got rid of it. And I think the reason that he did was to kind of be able to dangle Ukraine, as Oliver Stone mentions, I fear for Ukraine and I feel bad for Ukraine because they are literally a puppet to the United States just to keep poking the bear with Russia. And I think with what happened with Putin, he finally said enough is enough.
I think that Trump, being the deal maker, the art of the deal and all that, he would have, first of all, he wouldn't not be speaking. Biden is not prepared to call Putin. He's not prepared to talk to him, maybe because he's incoherent, I don't know. But Trump would have been on the phone. Trump probably would have been in Geneva meeting Putin. He would have done a deal that had something in it for everybody, maybe even for him. But this drift towards what could be cataclysmic war is taking place on Biden's watch, when his son is up to his neck with these oligarchs in Ukraine. Does anybody in the U.S. know the Hunter Biden story, or have they successfully wiped that?
It's been successfully wiped. And you saw with the New York Post, when they tweeted it out, how Twitter, the first thing they did was take it down, which just goes to show, media, United States, the media, all of it, they're all together on the same side of this. And it is strictly anti-Putin, anti-Russia. You're seeing also too, the pull of vodka. And, you had here, there's a restaurant called the Russian House that has nothing to do with anything. And people are attacking it, throwing rocks through the window. Americans have a funny way of trying to, it's almost like FOMO, the fear of missing out on a world issue, where, they, remember when France went against the United States and we changed our French fries to freedom fries because we thought we were doing something good. The same thing is happening with this. But again, Americans have no idea because they just have the 60-second quick summation. And it's, again, Putin bad, Russia bad, Ukraine good, Biden good. And nobody understands that Hunter Biden has a place in this. Victoria Nuland, you look at the 2014 coup It happened, and Maidan happened around February under the Obama administration, but with the same players. Isn't it ironic that the same players are back in power, and this is now happening at the end of February, the very same time that it did 8 years ago?
It is remarkable, and it's not a coincidence at all. The question of war, though, is serious, yeah? I mean, of course, the war would not begin with intercontinental ballistic missiles so separated by the Pacific and the Atlantic. The United States would be relatively untouched in a limited war. But for us in Europe, there is every possibility that this war will spread across the borders of Ukraine unless these talks succeed. Will the United States allow Zelensky to make the deal with Russia?
Personally, I don't think so. I think the United States has this the United States is very much a spoiled brat. You know, the last time we've ever really seen a bloody war was our own Civil War back in the 1800s. You know, World War II, Kuwait, Vietnam, Korean War. Shall I go on and all the other wars that we've been involved in? It's fought in some distant land, in some distant neighborhood, in some distant town. We don't get to see it every day. You know, the closest thing, you know, for example, you look at the Occupy Wall Street movement, they wanted it where they were living in tents outside of Wall Street, so they had to see it every single day. And still it was kind of like, no big. But you bring a war to where you live and you see it just like you Europeans have, you know, starting with World War II, you know, you don't want it. Whereas Americans, it's ingrained in our blood at this point. You know, I was talking to one of my producers and he was showing me, you know, May 9th, a big day for Russia where the military goes out into the Red Square and all the soldiers are saluting and they're there, you know, very stoic. And I looked at it and I was like, wow, that's like a little dictator-y looking, because here in the United States, everybody waves. You have the F-35s that cruise over the Super Bowl. You know, everything is the military is like, yeah, America. And it's very all smiles and waving. So I was like, why are you guys all weird and quiet? And he's like, because we've had a lot of people die in wars, 26 million just alone in World War II. So Americans were just so desensitized to war because we've never seen it here.
Very powerful stuff, Faran. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.